this isn't our first time that we've had smoke in the area in Oregon. And that's why it was 2018 where we had the smoke influence mostly in Southern Oregon, right?
Yes.
So tell me, what did the Oregon Solidarity Project do then? And what was kind of the goal?
Well, the issue developed in 2018 because the growers in the Rogue Valley for a California winery received a wholesale cancellation of their pick only a few days before the pick. And we as winemakers in the Willamette Valley knew that that fruit was fine because we've been receiving it. And we do get small amounts of fruit from the Rogue Valley to make small amounts for like wine clubs. And so we knew something was wrong. In fact, this wholesale cancellation occurred before even the test results, the independent lab test results were known.
Wow.
And so we felt that the growers who didn't have insurance, these small growers depended upon the sale of that fruit just to pay their mortgages. We knew they were in a serious situation. So when I was discussing this with Ed King, because we both buy fruit from Southern Oregon, and because the growers called us and said, "Can you do anything to help?" And Ed King says, "Well, here's the challenge we have. We don't have basically wine programs big enough to take that much fruit." He says, "Jim, we're going to have to make a product, basically a branded product, to have to get this into distribution to see if we can save these growers." So we paid the growers about $323,000. We paid them fair market price for what we could bring in within a few days. We actually went down and helped them pick the crop.
Goodness. Wow.
And then we dedicated the net proceeds to the Rogue Valley vintners. And so it's essentially a charity effort to help the Rogue Valley, because really a lot of that fruit was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Now, some of it was affected by smoke, and so we, as winemakers, Brent Stone from King Estate, J.P. Valet from Selvin Ridge, and then Jason Lett from Irie, and then our winemaking team got together and developed a set of protocols on how to handle, smoke-affected fruit. And here's what happens when smoke carries a number of organic compounds in it, which you're familiar with. If you have roasted coffee, whiskey, right? Or even a barrel-aged Pinot Noir, you're going to taste glycol, for example, an organic compound in the wine or in your whiskey or roasted coffee. And your other things like methyl glycol, for example. And that will give you that that smoky, effect in the wine, which a lot of us enjoy from a barrel-aged wine, a red wine. But in smoke, it can be more astringent. So what we had to do is we had to learn how to deal with it as winemakers. But by and large, it was really, it was really, frankly, unlawful and certainly unethical for the California winery to treat those growers that way. And so that's what the Oregon Solidarity Project was. And there's a whole lot of people, including the governor, for example, who got involved in helping us figure out how to sell 7,500 cases of wine that we had no distribution for.
Wow.
And so people like Safeway, for example, Roth's, Fresh Markets, Fred Meyer, and other retailers, Whole Foods, got in the act to help us figure out how to place this wine. And I brought this wine so you could taste it.
It's delicious.
Very good.
And it is delicious. Yeah. It's absolutely delicious wine. Now that's how we learned about how to deal with smoke impacted fruit, and how smoke impacts fruit is what happens is that smoke, the elements, that organic compound, will penetrate the waxy surface of the berry, skin of the berry, and it will bind up in the formation of sugar molecules. And get bound up. And so when you taste that fruit, you're not going to taste it. It'll get released from being bound up when you convert that sugar to alcohol and CO2. And it will release the glycol back right to you.
That's why people do the micro ferments.
Exactly. Now this year, we had a different situation. This year here in the Willamette Valley, we were affected by the Beachy Fire, Lion's Head, and the others. And that smoke got carried into from the east to the west and basically then turned south. So the northern part of the Willamette Valley had smoke for actually a very short period of time. from Silverton south, the smoke affected the vineyards for about 11 days.
Okay.
But remember how I told you how guaiacol will bind up with sugar molecules? The smoke blocked out the sun, if you remember what happened.
Oh, yeah.
We had temperatures drop by 15 degrees during the day.
Yeah, it was chilly.
Yes, and so what happened was, believe it or not, we took Brix readings every day of those 11 days. Didn't budge,
Yeah.
which means the grapes basically stalled. And what happened, yes, so you think about this. So I want you to think as growers and winemakers about the situation of our vintage in 2020. Mother Nature reigned during bloom, took our yields down by 38 to 42%. Now, you know that bankers and accountants don't like that, but you know your customers are going to love it.
Yep.
Because that means you've got lower yields, right, on each
Right.
vine. You're going to get incredible. So this could be a remarkable year. And so then along comes the fire, and frankly, a lot of people panicked because we couldn't get the test results, right, out of the labs because they were all consumed with all the testing they had to do in California. So we had to do microferments. We did 42 microferments, and in those 42, we found 3 smoke affected. And they were right in the path. They were near Silverton. And so there's such a thing as fresh smoke or new smoke and
Gotcha.
older
Yeah.
smoke. And they were right in the path of that new fresh smoke that was blowing from the east to the west.
Right.
They were seriously affected. So here's what you do as a winemaker. You know, you can hand pick instead of machine harvest. You can then put those clusters, bunches, in the press hole and pop the juice, pop the skins using that press very gently. So you drop your juice yields considerably. You don't allow any skin contact, and that's how you deal just with, you take that Pinot Noir, for example, you got free run, and you can actually save that juice. If there's really any problem remaining, you can use a couple things as a winemaker. You can use yeast holes, and yeast holes are like sponges, right? They'll soak up those aroma compounds. Or you can use carbon.
Yep, a little charcoal.
Yeah. And what, believe it or not, it has a polar attraction. You know, it has a magnetic attraction to the aroma compounds.
Yeah.
And it will also, but there's another thing you can do if you've got a serious problem with Pinot Noir. And you can, for example, very gently press those clusters in the press, take the free run juice, and you can put it on fresh skins. So let's say if you're making a Oregon appellated wine, and you've got really fresh, clean skins, you can take that juice from a really damaged fruit, frankly, put it on those skins, and you can save a grower. Now, we didn't have to do that in our case because really what happened was people panicked. And some of these vineyards didn't have smoke exposure for more than 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
So we took in we put out the call that we were willing to help them, and we took our winery to the maximum. Now remember, we're a big estate grower,
Sure.
so our yields are down 38 to 42%. We grow 500 acres of vines here in the hills of the Willamette Valley. And so we had capacity. So we put out the call. We took in 20 growers' fruit that had their contracts canceled, principally from California winemakers
Yep.
who
Gotcha.
didn't have any tests. There
Right.
was no testing
No,
done.
they panicked too.
Yes. And a lot of these growers, we favored growers who did not have any alternative, any insurance. And by the way, insurance is not like a silver bullet. You know,
Right.
insurance gives you only a small percentage or
Right.
up to, and it's expensive. So that's not necessarily a
I'd imagine most small growers aren't going to have the best insurance they can get.
exactly,
Yeah.
and many of them don't.
Sure.
But I can tell you, we took in fruit. I'll give you one example. He's allowed me to talk about it. Tim Ramey owns Zenith Vineyard,
Sure.
and I used to manage that vineyard like 25 years ago. So I know that vineyard. I know that fruit. He grows some of the best Pinot Noir in Oregon,
Yep.
up in the Dundee Hills.
Sure.
And it used to be O'Connor Vineyard, and then when O'Connor sold it to Tim, they changed it to Zenith. Well, for the first time in many, many years, I was able to get some fruit from Tim Ramey because he had his contracts canceled.
Wow.
I took in 20 tons of Pinot Noir, and you know what? We paid him a fair price, so we weren't holding anybody up.
Yeah, I'll take it, but I'll give you
Yeah.
$5 a ton.
Yeah, and there was some of that out there, but by and large, Oregon wineries, And winemakers and grape growers, they treat each other fairly. And you'll find a few situations that were maybe not quite right, but by and large, the industry really did come to each other's aid. And frankly, wineries have more alternatives than growers. We can solve problems more easily than a grower can because we
Last
have other
minute,
forms
yeah.
of, right, other sources of fruit. So the growers are very vulnerable in situations like this. And so I think we're duty bound as Oregon winemakers to help them, to protect them when we have situations like this.
Yeah.
Now, here's what's funny about Tim Ramey's situation. He finally got his test results back, right? Clean as a whistle. Right? And you come down and stick your head in our fermenters, and yeah, they're beautiful. So, in a way, we're lucky. We're really lucky because we've got a lot of wonderful wine in our cellar.
Right.
Now here I've moved pretty fast through this, and
Yeah, no, that's important stuff. Now, when you say you took that in, was that you at Willamette Valley Vineyards
yes,
saying, I want that fruit?
Yes. We put out a call and said we will help up to our gills, right?
Right,
So we actually are stuffed.
busting. Now, has the Oregon Solidarity brand been on the move with this?
This was basically a one-off.
Okay.
This was the effort to help the Rogue Valley growers. And we needed a brand because we don't make Pinot Noir from the Rogue Valley, right?
Yep.
And or Rosé or even Chardonnay from the Rogue Valley, and neither did Ed. So we had to have a brand. But in this case, we do make Pinot Noir. We do make Pinot Gris,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
And we did work with these growers. Some growers machine harvest, for example. We did tests to find out what's the best way to treat this fruit. So we took that Silverton fruit that was machine harvested. They ran tests for us with Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir. And we found machine harvesting actually produced some smoke effect in the resulting ferments.
Why? Any ideas?
I think it's the grape skins getting pulverized in the process. And of course, as you know, when we hand harvest a Pinot Gris, for example, we pop those berries in the press.
Yeah.
Whereas they're beating that, Pinot Gris berry up in the field, right?
Yeah.
And it's coming to the winery, you're basically soaking in its own skins.
It's like getting crushed while it's getting picked almost.
Yeah, that's right. And we don't crush them at all.
Okay.
So, and we take a lower yield. So you can actually produce a very nice outcome from pretty challenging situations. And I think that we have a duty as winemakers to do as much as we can to help them.
Yeah.
Right.
No doubt.
Appreciate that.
Now, so it sounds like so far you're hearing the further south, closer to the fires, that's where the more influenced fruit has been.
Yeah.
Anything? What about Chehalem? We had the fire up on Chehalem Mountain. Did any vineyards get affected up there?
Yes,
that
they
you know
did.
of?
Yes, they did. And we have some results from that. So there were pockets where the smoke would lay down in lower elevations. In these pockets, it did affect them. And so you might see a rosé coming from a Pinot Noir vineyard. But the rosé,
Sure.
they're beautiful wines.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're really, as you know, I mean, it's going to be hard for us to roll back the clock on what's
Right.
happening to the carbon content in our atmosphere. We're going to have to figure this out.
Yep.
We're going to have to figure out how to be deal in a world where things are getting drier.
Yeah.
Right? Our forests have been drying
Sure.
out for the last 25 years. We've known that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We only had 28 inches of rainfall in the last water year in the Willamette Valley. 28 inches.
That's
It was
not
like
enough.
70 something then. I mean, when we first moved here, I think. In the
Well,
90s.
yeah, I mean, when I started, it was a whole different, right?
Yeah.
34 years ago. You should see my records, my farming records. So things are really
different
drying out,
Wow.
and so we're going to have to learn how to do this better.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So there are some, we've heard rumors, we haven't gone directly to any wineries, but we're hearing that some folks are letting grapes sit on the vine. They're not harvesting. They're essentially writing off either those vineyards or their Pinot Noir harvest this year. Thoughts on wineries choosing to do that?
It's unfortunate that they are because there's a lot of work in that fruit. There's a lot of great value in that fruit.
Sure.
Now, every vineyard is different. We found even vineyard spots in a vineyard are different. So they're the best judge of that. But what actually the
Fair.
fires have had the biggest impact on us in saving this crop is that it's sucking up the pickers because they're fighting fires, and so we are not getting those pickers released to us from the fires until this next week. Well, you know what happened to the weather, right? So we've had to go out there and figure out how to right. So it's gotten very challenging from the perspective of organizing and affording a harvest, because the cost, of course, of picking has gone way up as well.
Well, and COVID affected that as well too.
Right.
Right.
Our international help wasn't here.
That's
You know,
right.
Our harvest crews weren't what they have been.
So
in years past.
we've had the most challenging harvest picker recruitment
Yeah.
in my 34 years.
Huh.
Wow.
Haven't thought much about that. So what you're saying is the same people who would normally be picking fruit are fighting fires?
Yes,
No
yes.
shit. Huh.
And and a really good picker, as you know, a really good picker can make around $35 to $40 an hour
Sure.
in our vineyards based upon our per bucket rates. But when they're fighting those fires, they're fighting the fires around the clock.
Right.
And actually, we need them there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a
So, but we just harvested this last week, and a good half of my crew were still wearing their fire jackets.
Wow.
So they came right out of the fires, right into the
Unreal.
vineyard.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Huh.
That's work ethic.
Oh, they're
Yeah, exactly.
amazing.
All
They're
right.
amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jim. I know it's great to have all that information that we can hopefully get out to our listeners. Very interesting stuff.